Hi YouTube, it's Kathy and this is my weekly entertainment wrap-up for January 14th through 20th. This week I read 5 books, I watched 1 show, and I listened to 2 books. This is obviously not a normal reading week for me, and that's because I did have a few days at that cabin in the woods where we didn't have cell phone reception, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have TV, we didn't have anything but books and ourselves and the snow, and it was lovely. That meant I had a lot of quality reading time and I definitely took advantage of that. That being said, however, next weekly wrap-up is probably going to be a lot slimmer than this one just because this next week is going to be very, very busy for me. Tonight I'm actually helping out at a friend's play reading, doing the front of house for that, and then we're going up island for the week to visit family and those types of things. And then next Sunday, when you see my next video, I will actually be on a plane to France. We've been planning this trip for a while, but it's just hitting me now that it's only a week away that it's finally happening, and I just can't stop myself from going over like packing lists and different things in my head, and I'm just very excited to go. The first book that I finished this week is The Night House by Jo Nesbø. This person usually writes mystery thriller, but this is the first time that they've published something in the horror category. I honestly don't really know how to feel about this book. I don't think I liked it. There were aspects to it that I enjoyed, but overall I'm just kind of about it. Basically, this one starts out with a 14-year-old boy who is new to this very, very small town, and he's out with one of his school friends, and he's like, hey, there's a phone box, let's prank call somebody, and he gets his friend to prank call that person, and that pretty much goes immediately wrong when that person starts getting devoured by the telephone receiver. Of course, people in this small town want to know what happened to this other kid, and when he tells them the truth, they obviously don't believe him. He then goes on this little bit of a journey to prove that he's not lying, but again, it doesn't exactly go the way he wants. That's part 1 of this, and then there's also a part 2 and a part 3, and it's one of those books that leaves you going, wait, which is the actual thing that happened? And you can kind of decide for yourself, I guess. Like I said, there were some aspects I enjoyed. There were some creepy scenes. I kind of wanted to know what was happening, but once we got into part 2 and part 3, I was just like, okay, sure. And there was some overlap in the stories that I noticed during part 1, so when they were brought up in part 2 and part 3, I was like, oh, well, that explains why that was just kind of really convenient, but it doesn't make me like it more. So this was okay. If you've read it, please tell me what you thought of it, because I'm really curious. Next I read Demons and Death Drops, a queer performance horror anthology, which is exactly what it sounds like on the tin. This is a mixture of short stories, poetry, and comics, all having to do with queer people and all having to do with performances. And obviously they're all horror. Like any anthology, there's going to be kind of a mixed bag. There's stories you're going to like better than others, but overall I gave this pretty much a 4-star because I did enjoy most of my time with it. This is also a book that was made via a Kickstarter, which I funded, so it was very cool for it to finally come in the mail and me to see what they did with it. So if you're at all interested by the phrase queer performance horror anthology, this is definitely one you should look into. As for the last 3 books in this section, there are actually 3 books from the same trilogy, and the first book in this trilogy was my favorite book from middle school. And I've been rereading some of the works that I read from this author during middle school and high school, and the ones that I've reread so far I haven't really enjoyed. There's a lot of questionable material in there, so I was kind of afraid that this favorite book was going to be a little bit ruined for me. The first book in this trilogy is Remember Me. This is the Remember Me trilogy by Christopher Pike, and the first book stands up, actually. There are aspects of this book that have stayed with me since middle school, so we're talking over 2 decades at this point. And this book is all about this girl named Sherry Cooper who goes to a party with her boyfriend at her friend's house, and then by the end of the night we know that she's dead and she's fallen off this balcony, and we don't know if she was pushed, we don't know who would have pushed her, we don't know if she jumped. However, she's come back as a ghost and she's trying to figure out the same thing. This one has your regular twists and turns, but now you have a ghost following people around, looking into their dreams, trying to figure out who could have possibly done whatever happened, because she still doesn't really know. What I also really enjoyed is because I've read this book previously and it stuck with me so much, as I was reading through I was like, oh, here's a little hint to how it's going to end because I remember how it's going to end and who done it. But when you're just reading it through for the first time, it just seems like a normal description. So I was pleasantly surprised that this one actually stood up. The next 2 books I read were the other 2 books in the series, which I don't believe I'd read before. I definitely hadn't read the 3rd one before. Goodreads says I've read the 2nd one before, but also when I first joined Goodreads, I was just adding a bunch bunch of things retroactively that I had read, so I wouldn't have 0 things on my Goodreads when it first started. I was just adding a bunch of Christopher Pike titles because I know I read most of them in my youth. The second story is called The Return, and the third story is called The Last Story. Now these books I gave 2 stars each. Here's the thing, I just really wish that the first book existed and these 2 books didn't, for a few different reasons. In this book we find out that Sherry has the option to be something called a wanderer, which is basically she's up in heaven or whatever you want to call it. That's what we call it because we're down on earth, blah blah blah, who cares. But basically it means that there's a soul that's ready to leave their body, but like they don't want to die or anything like that. They're just at peace with leaving their body at this point. And she has the option to take over that body and go back to earth and basically try to do some good. So far, sounds like an okay premise, sure, until you find out that the body that she's taking over is that of a Hispanic woman, and she's being sent to Earth specifically to help out this community, which is just a white savior trope. In addition to that, there is one queer character, the best friend of the person whose body she's going to be taking over, whose name is Jean Rodriguez, by the way. Her best friend is a lesbian, or is potentially bisexual. It kind of wavers throughout this book whether or not she's attracted to men, and some of the conversations in there are very reflective of the types of conversations people would be having in the early 90s when this book was published, such as, yeah, my best friend's a lesbian, but like she doesn't hit on me, so she's fine. Additionally, this book treats anybody with a physical disability or disfigurement pretty poorly. And then there's also a character who eventually ends up in a wheelchair, and that isn't treated great. And then when you get to the last story, it's 3 years later and suddenly Jean Rodriguez is a best-selling author and she sold a bunch of books, one of them being Remember Me. She just changed all the names so people from her former life might not necessarily know that it's true that she came back from the dead and all of that type of stuff. And she's actually the executive producer of a company that is making one of her books into a movie, and it's all about that process. And yeah, it's just more of the same, where I feel like, if I'm being generous, Christopher Pike was trying to do good things with characters with disabilities. But then we also have this character that's just like straight out lying to a blind person quite often on the page, or cheating on her partner because her partner is now in the body of somebody who is a paraplegic, and, you know, having conversations about doing sexy things, even if there's certain aspects of his body that will not be stimulated by sexy times. In short, if you're going to read these, just read the first one. The other 2 are just kind of a mess. The one show I watched this week is, of course, Taskmaster. We finished the 10th season, we're halfway through the 11th season, and it's just delightful. We don't know anybody from this season, at least I don't think we do, but they're all just so fun to watch. Also, in case you're wondering how we're watching them, they're actually all on their YouTube channel. Like, every episode is uploaded to YouTube, and they're even in playlists for you, which makes it super easy. As for the 2 books I listed this week, the first one is a memoir called Hijab Butch Blues. This one is by an author who is anonymous. They write under a pseudonym, and given some of the very vulnerable things they're talking about and the culture they come from, that's understandable. What I really enjoyed about this author takes stories from the Quran, which I'm not particularly familiar with, although some of them do cross over a little bit with the Christian stories, so I kind of know them from the Christian side of things because I had to go to Sunday school as a kid and that type of stuff. And I listened to the Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat soundtrack a lot as a kid, so that's how I know some things. But anyway, this author is talking about those stories, how they learned about those stories, and how those stories kind of connect to who they are and their practice of being Muslim, and all of that together was just written so beautifully, because we often think that it's a dichotomy of either you're religious or you're queer, and no, there's a lot of people that are both, and that is okay. There are certain people that interpret text in ways where it's like being queer is wrong, and there are certain people who are queer and can interpret the same text and be like, actually, I'm pretty sure that this person, queer. I found this a very valuable reading experience, and I definitely recommend it. The other book I listened to is Did You Hear About Kitty Carr? This one is told in 3 different perspectives, I believe. The first perspective is this girl named Elise. She lives in the current times. She is an actress. She is up for an Oscar nomination soon. She's also supposed to be getting married. But the woman that actually lives next door to them, who also used to be an actress, recently died, and they have to deal with her estate because apparently her and her sisters are actually inheriting everything from Kitty's estate. We also get the perspectives of a woman named Hazel from many, many decades decades previously, and then also the perspective of her daughter, who is named Mary Magdalene. One thing that these characters all have in common is they are Black women. However, due to the way that Hazel's daughter came into the world, she is able to pass as white. That means that when we're in these historical chapters, we see her upbringing in this small southern area, and the tension between her mother and the family that fathered her, and how she still works for them, and then also what happens when she goes to visit a friend in Los Angeles and ends up staying there and working there and passing. When we were first just talking in the chapters between Elise and Hazel, it took me a little bit to figure out what the connection between these characters might be, but as soon as Hazel's daughter was born, I kind of figured out where this was going and very much enjoyed all of the conversations around that. I also really enjoy the conversations about these different women coming together in secret societies to help fundraise for people that couldn't pass. This one had a lot of intriguing conversations, and I picked this one up because I can't remember who said it, but somebody said if you like The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, but you want there to be a little bit more nuance when it comes to the conversations about race, then this is definitely the book that you want. And yeah, that makes sense to me. That's it for this week. If you've read, watched, or listened to any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment but want to make sure that I know you were here, just leave me an emoji or a smiley face if you happen to be on your keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, so I set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. The link for that, as always, is down below. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye! And also don't forget, when my next weekly wrap-up goes up, I will be at the airport.